Something unthinkable is happening inside Iran right now. Their own generals are turning. On Tuesday morning this week, Air Force 2 was sitting on the tarmac at Joint Base Andrews, engines running, J.D. Vance and his team ready to fly to Pakistan for peace talks with Iran. And then, nothing. The plane sat there for hours, not because of weather, not because of a mechanical problem, because nobody inside Iran could tell America whether Iran's own foreign minister was allowed to show up. The foreign minister wanted to come. He had told Pakistan he was coming. He had given the signal. And then somewhere in Tehran, a general overruled him, and the signal disappeared. Air Force 2 eventually shut its engines down. Vance and Kushner boarded a different plane, back to Washington. A U.S. official told Axios this week, "We saw an absolute fracture inside Iran between the negotiators and the military, with neither side having access to the supreme leader, who is not responsive." Read that again. Iran's supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, who took power after his father was assassinated, is not responding to his own people, while his country is at war, while his generals are publicly overruling his foreign minister, while his economy is collapsing at $435 million per day. And the question that should be keeping every American awake is this: who exactly is in charge of a country with ballistic missiles pointed at American bases, when the person who is supposed to be in charge is not responding? Drop your answer in the comments right now, because this answer changes everything about how this war ends. Let us go through exactly what happened, because the sequence of events inside Iran over the past 10 days is the most dramatic internal power struggle any major country has had during an active war in modern memory. Friday, April 17th, Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi goes on television and announces, "The Strait of Hormuz is completely open to commercial shipping. Stock markets around the world jump. Oil prices fall. Trump posts that a deal is very close." For 6 hours, it looks like the beginning of the end of the war. Then the IRGC moves. Iran's state media outlet Tasnim, which is affiliated directly with the Revolutionary Guard, publishes an extraordinary attack on its own country's foreign minister. It describes his announcement as a complete lack of tact in information dissemination. A state media outlet owned by the military publicly humiliating the foreign minister. Hours later, IRGC Commander Major General Ahmad Vahidi's forces close the strait again, fire on ships, declare that no vessel of any kind should approach. The foreign minister's announcement is erased. Then comes the detail that explains everything. Axios confirmed, U.S. officials first began seeing the divisions after the first round of Islamabad talks, when it became clear that IRGC Commander Vahidi and his deputies had rejected much of what Iran's own negotiators had agreed to discuss. Araghchi was negotiating. Vahidi was not implementing. Iran's foreign minister was making deals that Iran's military was refusing to honor. And according to the Critical Threats Assessment, Vahidi and individuals close to him have effectively taken control of not only Iran's military response, but Iran's entire negotiating position. To understand why the IRGC is blocking peace, you need to understand who Ahmad Vahidi is, and what his calculation is. Ahmad Vahidi is the IRGC commander who has been running Iran's military response since the war began. He is a hardliner. He has been sanctioned by the United States for decades. He was Iran's defense minister between 2009 and 2013. He was indicted by Argentina for his alleged role in the 1994 bombing of the Buenos Aires Jewish Community Center that killed 85 people. He has spent his entire career building the IRGC into the dominant power structure of the Iranian state. And here is his calculation, spelled out by the Critical Threats Project at the American Enterprise Institute. The IRGC's closure of the Strait of Hormuz is Iran's single most powerful economic weapon. As long as the strait is closed, Iran has leverage. The moment the strait opens, Iran loses that leverage. A peace deal that opens the Hormuz gives Iran economic relief from the blockade, but it also removes the IRGC's primary bargaining chip, and it almost certainly requires Iran to accept limits on nuclear enrichment, limits that reduce the IRGC's long-term deterrence capability. Vahidi is not blocking peace because he wants more war. Vahidi is blocking peace because the terms of peace, as America has defined them, remove the IRGC's power. The remaining IRGC officers are seen steering Iran toward a more hardline combative stance, favoring continued fighting instead of a ceasefire deal that would erode its main source of leverage over the U.S., the Strait of Hormuz. CNN: This is not a military commander acting irrationally. This is a military commander making a rational calculation about institutional survival, which makes him far more dangerous than an irrational one. Confirmed facts. Critical Threats, April 18, 2026. Euronews, April 22, 2026. Fortune, April 18, 2026. Here is the element of this story that makes everything else more dangerous. The person who is supposed to resolve this power struggle, Iran's supreme leader Mojtaba Khamenei, is not doing it. Axios confirmed from a U.S. official, Neither side has access to the supreme leader, who is not responsive. Mojtaba Khamenei took power after his father Ali Khamenei was assassinated in the opening strikes of Operation Epic Fury on February 28. He has been in power for less than 2 months. He inherited a country at war, a military in the middle of a campaign, an economy in freefall, a power structure built around his father's decades of personal authority. And according to Euronews, Ali Larijani, Tehran's longtime power broker, who restructured the IRGC into autonomous regional headquarters, was killed earlier in the war. His death removed the institutional mediator who had kept military and civilian factions working together. With the death of the elder Khamenei, the system now appears less dependent on a single figure and more reliant on a network of interconnected actors with shared interests, in what Iran insiders see as a shift from a cleric-dominated system to a more IRGC-centric power structure. Wikipedia in plain English: Iran is transitioning from a system where one supreme leader makes final decisions to a system where the IRGC makes decisions and the supreme leader ratifies them, if he ratifies them at all. A U.S. official told Axios, "We saw that there is an absolute fracture inside Iran between the negotiators and the military. That fracture exists because the person who should be closing it is not responding." Now here is the question I want you to answer in the comments. Is Mojtaba Khamenei too weak to control the IRGC, or is he deliberately letting Vahidi run the war? Because those two answers lead to completely different outcomes for this war. And then there is the third figure in this power struggle, the one who has almost no power at all, President Masoud Pezeshkian. Pezeshkian won the presidency in 2024 on a reformist platform. He wanted diplomacy. He wanted sanctions relief. He wanted to rebuild Iran's economy through engagement with the world. He got a war instead. And according to Euronews, he has been effectively blocked from key decisions since the war began. On March 25, Pezeshkian was forced to appoint Mohammad Bagher Zolghadar as Secretary of the Supreme National Security Council after IRGC commanders, particularly Vahidi, demanded it, despite objections from civilian officials. Bloomberg, the president of Iran, was told who to appoint to his own National Security Council by the military. He objected. The military insisted. He complied. That is not a president governing a country. That is a president being governed by his own military. When Iraqi announced that the Strait of Hormuz would be reopened, hardline commentators and state media attacked him, indicating that he cannot make such a decision by himself. Bloomberg, Iran's foreign minister, cannot announce that a waterway is open without military permission. Iran's president cannot appoint his own national security officials without military approval. And Iran's supreme leader is not responding to either of them. Iran has a government, but according to every analyst who has studied this, the IRGC is the government. Now here is why this internal fracture explains everything that has been confusing about the Iran-US negotiations, because once you understand who is actually in charge in Tehran, the entire pattern of the talks makes sense. Every time Iran's diplomatic team has gotten close to a deal, something has blown it up from the inside. Round 1 in Islamabad. Vance sat for 21 hours. A deal was reportedly close. And then Iran's negotiators had to call Tehran for permission, and the deal collapsed. Now we know why. Axios confirmed. U.S. officials saw the divisions after round 1, when it became clear Vahidi and his deputies had rejected what Iran's own negotiators had discussed. The negotiators were making concessions Vahidi had not authorized. Round 2 never happened. Vance's plane sat on the tarmac at Joint Base Andrews for hours, because Ghalibaf and Arakchi needed IRGC permission to board their plane to Pakistan, and that permission kept appearing and disappearing. By Tuesday morning the signal was gone. Air Force 2 went back to Washington. The pattern is now confirmed. Iran sends negotiators who want a deal. The IRGC countermands those negotiators. The deal falls apart. And then Iran's civilian officials have to publicly defend the IRGC's decision, which is why Iran's public statements keep sounding contradictory. Because they are coming from two different power centers with two different strategies. One side wants a deal that ends the economic bleeding. The other side wants to keep the Hormuz card until America offers terms the IRGC can call a victory. And right now, Vahidi is winning that internal argument. Confirmed facts. Axios, April 22, 2026. Critical threats, April 18, 2026. Here is the number that makes the IRGC's strategy increasingly desperate and increasingly dangerous. Iran is losing $435 million every single day from the U.S. naval blockade. Not 435 million dies per month, per day, every 24 hours. Since April 13th, when the blockade began, Iran has lost approximately $5 billion in oil revenue. Its currency, the rial, has gone into free fall. Inflation is accelerating. Small businesses in Tehran are closing. The teapot refineries that kept Iran's domestic fuel supply running on cheap sanctioned oil are running out of stock. Iran's strategic oil reserves, the buffer that was supposed to last months, are being consumed faster than expected because Iranian production is dropping and exports are blocked simultaneously. Fortune magazine confirmed, with the U.S. targeting Iran's oil revenue via a naval blockade, the economy as well as the IRGC's own source of funds will come under more strain. That last detail is crucial. The IRGC is not just Iran's military. The IRGC is Iran's largest economic conglomerate. It controls construction companies, telecommunications firms, import-export businesses, and energy sector contracts. The U.S. blockade is not just hurting ordinary Iranians, it is cutting off the IRGC's own revenue streams, which means Vahidi's hardline strategy is creating an internal contradiction. The longer he keeps the Hormuz closed, the more he drains the very economic engine that funds his own forces. The IRGC is blocking the deal that would save Iran's economy, while simultaneously bleeding out from the same economic pressure it is refusing to relieve. That is not a sustainable position, and every analyst watching this knows it. Here is what the United States now understands about Iran's power structure, and how it is changing its strategy accordingly. Trump posted on Truth Social this week, Iran doesn't want the Strait of Hormuz closed. They want it open so they can make $500 million a day. They only say they want it closed because I have it totally blockaded, so they merely want to save face. He added, people approached me 4 days ago saying, sir, Iran wants to open up the strait immediately. Trump is describing Araghchi's diplomatic signals, the civilian side of Iran that wants a deal. But the blockade is Trump's pressure on the IRGC, the military side that is blocking that deal. The strategy Washington has settled on, according to Axios, is to squeeze Iran economically hard enough that the IRGC's internal position becomes unsustainable. The theory is simple. The IRGC can override the foreign minister once. It can override him twice. But if the economy keeps collapsing at $435 million per day, and the IRGC's own revenue streams keep shrinking, eventually the cost of blocking peace becomes higher than the cost of accepting it. Trump gave Iran a specific timeline this week. He said, I'm giving them just a few more days to respond. Defense Secretary Hegseth confirmed, the blockade stays until a final deal is signed. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs confirmed American forces remain ready to resume major combat operations at literally a moment's notice. Washington's message to Vahidi is direct. Your hardline strategy is costing Iran more than you can sustain, and your supreme leader is not going to save you. Confirmed facts. Axios, April 22, 2026. Trump Truth Social confirmed. Here are the 3 scenarios for how Iran's internal power struggle resolves, and which one happens will determine whether this war ends or explodes. Tell me in the comments which one you think is most likely. Scenario 1. The IRGC blinks. Economic pressure becomes unbearable. The IRGC's own finances are too strained to continue. Vahidi quietly authorizes Araghchi to negotiate a deal. Iran accepts something close to America's terms, a nuclear pause. Hormuz open with face-saving language, sanctions relief phased in. The supreme leader ratifies it. The war ends. This scenario is possible if Vahidi calculates that a deal he can spin as a victory is better than an economic collapse he cannot hide. Probability, according to analysts, roughly 30 to 35% right now. Scenario 2. The fracture deepens and becomes a crisis. The IRGC and civilian government reach a breaking point. Iranian officials begin leaking information to Western media, as they apparently already are according to Axios. The supreme leader is forced to choose sides. If he chooses the IRGC, the war continues. If he chooses the civilians, Vahidi is removed and a deal becomes possible. This is the most uncertain scenario because it depends on a leader who, according to American officials, is not currently responding to either side. Probability, 40 to 45%. Scenario 3. No deal. Ceasefire collapses. War resumes. The IRGC continues blocking every diplomatic opening. Trump's patience runs out. Bombs start falling again. Iran's remaining military infrastructure, including the half of its missiles still intact, gets targeted in a new wave of strikes. The economic catastrophe deepens. This is the worst case for Iran, for the Gulf, for oil prices, and for American consumers paying $4 a gallon at the pump. Probability, 20 to 25%, and rising every day the fracture is not resolved. Analyst assessment, based on critical threats, Axios, ISW/AEI analysis. Here is where everything stands on April 26, 2026, Day 57 of the US-Iran war. Iran's supreme leader Mojtaba Khamenei is barely communicating. Iran's President Pezeshkian was forced to appoint an IRGC loyalist to his own National Security Council against his will. Iran's Foreign Minister Araghchi announced the Strait of Hormuz was open and was publicly humiliated by IRGC-affiliated media within hours. Iran's military commander Vahidi overruled the foreign minister and closed the strait again, fired on ships. including Indian ships that Iran had told were friendly. Air Force Two sat on the tarmac at Joint Base Andrews for hours, while Iran's factions argued about whether to let the diplomats board their plane. Vance and Kushner flew back to Washington without going anywhere. A U.S. official told Axios, "There is an absolute fracture inside Iran, with neither side having access to the supreme leader, who is not responsive." And an Iran expert at the University of Tennessee told the Wall Street Journal, "Because the main arbitrator is gone, the fight between different factions has started. Something unthinkable is happening inside Iran right now, not on the battlefield, not in the Strait, inside the government, inside the power structure that 85 million Iranians depend on to end this war. The generals are running the country, the diplomats are being overruled, the supreme leader is silent, and the bombs could start falling again at any moment if the wrong faction makes the wrong decision." Before you go, I want to know in the comments, do you think Vahidi is trying to win this war or trying to survive it? Because the answer to that question is the most important variable in whether the next chapter of this story is peace or fire. Subscribe and turn on notifications, because what happens inside that Tehran power struggle in the next 72 hours will determine everything.